Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I may be still a little bit hoarse, still coughing. So this week what I wanted to do is bring you a video. It's kind of involved with crime, but not in the general sense. This is based on a movie I watched very recently, which is a true story. And so interested was I in the actual story that I did some research and wanted to share it with you. The movie at the moment you can watch. So hopefully when I tell you the story it will inspire you to want to go and watch a pretty damn good movie. So the movie in question is Escape from Pretoria, which stars Daniel Radcliffe and Daniel Webber. They star as real life activists for the ANC. Tim Jenkin, played by Daniel Radcliffe, and Stephen Lee, obviously played by Daniel Webber. So to tell you the story I need to bring you back in time to 1948 and to the birth of Tim Jenkin. He was born in Cape Town in South Africa, and he grew up a pretty normal lad, a normal life, wasn't really aware much of politically what was going on around him, and he worked and lived in South Africa until 1970 when he moved to England and began work in a fiberglass factory. At this time he felt that the whole system was unjust, he wasn't happy, and he got into socialism, and this in turn made him interested in looking into the system in his own native South Africa, and he was pretty disgusted with what he discovered. He later said that he grew up as a normal, complacent white South African, and he accepted the system for 21 years without ever having questioned it. So in 1970, Tim Jenkin enrolled in the University of Cape Town and he studied social sciences, coming out with a bachelor degree in 1973. And it was while he was actually studying social sciences in sociology class that he actually met the other gentleman we're going to talk about here, Stephen Lee. So when they got together and talked about their very mutual feeling about the political system in South Africa and apartheid in particular, that they went about sourcing and looking up banned material by apartheid, and they would photocopy it and they would share it among other students, sort of trying to educate people, to spread the word as to the unfairness to the situation, how unjust it was, how black people were being treated in South Africa at the time, and they sort of, I suppose, were early time social justice warriors. So the two desperately wanted to make a real change to the situation, but they realised that in order to do this, and this is where we come on to the crime section of the video, they would have to do it by unconstitutional means, so they would have to break the law. And it's at this time they both became aware of the ANC, the African National Congress, which was a banned party in South Africa at that time. So the two men in 1974 in February travelled to England to a town called Swindon, and they both worked standard jobs. They were actually waiting on their membership for the ANC clearing at the time, and while they were there they wanted to sort of learn about the situation, get training in order to be able to help their own country back home. They received training on various tactics the ANC would use, most notably spreading propaganda material amongst people, using something known as a leaflet bomb. Jenkin would also meet his wife Robin while they were actually in London. So in 1975 the men head back to their native South Africa and they buy a duplicator, a typewriter and some stationery, and they set up in a tiny garage. Later they would go on to set up in a small apartment, and they set about typing up and distributing leaflets to try to educate other people as to the system, the regime, how things were, and they properly set about in earnest with the ANC agenda. So during this time, Jenkin actually worked as a researcher at the Institute for Social Development at the University of Western Cape, which was actually known as a university, to use the terminology that was used at the time, of coloured people. So it was not something that a white student should really be attending, but obviously Jenkin, he liked to do things as he saw fit. He was very much not in agreement with the system, and good for him. And in the same year, his friend Stephen Lee, he went to Johannesburg to look for work. So during this time the ANC coincidentally sent them both on their first mission, which was to distribute leaflets about the social injustice, to support the ANC and to try and bring about help and support for the struggle for liberation of a lot of people in South Africa. They did this via leaflet and the aforementioned letter bomb. Now, in saying bomb, I don't mean bomb in that's something that's going to bring harm to people. This was designed just to disrupt the actual leaflets in the box or wherever they may be, so to send them up in a flurry in the street to attract people's attention, and people's going to go and get a leaflet, what's this all about? So just to make that clear. This was planned to take place on the 21st of March, which was the anniversary of the Sharpeville massacre. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. If you do want to look it up, there is a lot of detail online. This was actually a massacre of 69 black people by police officers. They were basically at a social justice rally, and they were gunned down. The police opened fire on the crowd and 69 people died. There is argument as to the behaviour of the crowd. A lot of people disagree. As I say, I'm not getting into that in this video, but this is the ANC wanted this to happen on that particular anniversary. Obviously, it creates a bit more impact and makes people that maybe weren't aware of everything that was going on, sort of raises the profile of what they're dealing with. So the two continued over the next couple of years doing what they were doing and distributing leaflets, working on the leaflet bomb to make it more effective so it could be triggered remotely, so they didn't have to be stood right beside it, as people that were doing this were very much the target of police at that time. They were looking for these activists. So in May 1976, Jenkins actually travelled to London at the request of the ANC, while Lee continued to work in Cape Town planting leaflet bombs. It was during this time that 4 other ANC activists were actually arrested for doing the same thing and were given prison sentences. But undeterred, Jenkins continued with what they were doing. They even changed their printing equipment to avoid detection, they moved premises, and they continued pretty much doing what they had been doing, undeterred by the other activists' arrests. So it was around this time there were a few worrying signs that Jenkins was being monitored. He wasn't too sure, but he went to London to see his wife for 6 weeks. He returned without incident, and in September, himself and Stephen Lee hung a 10-metre long banner with the words ANC Lives from a very public building in central Johannesburg. This was with a timed triggered leaflet drop, which dropped hundreds and hundreds of leaflets from the position that the actual banner was hung. Lee moved back to Cape Town in December of that year, and he enrolled for a master's degree in sociology, where himself and Lee continued with their work. It was around this time that it became very evident that what they were doing was being very closely monitored by the authorities. So the day inevitably came. It was 3 a.m. on the 2nd of March 1978, and Lee and Jenkins were actually caught by the police. They were seen moving printing equipment between different dwellings, and they never really did discover who had told on them, but they came to the conclusion that they could have only been caught by meticulous and quite long-winded being surveilled by the police over a long period of time. They were both taken to Keeldon police station and separated, and they were both grilled, they were both questioned separately without being made aware of their rights at any time. Now, this was actually legal at the time under the Terrorism Act, and they were allowed to be held for up to 60 days without charge. Lee at this time did actually make an attempt to escape, and he almost did succeed, but he was subsequently captured. While the men were actually being held, awaiting trial and awaiting sentencing, they were actually allowed to see their families. So they had a visit from their family, and at this time Lee's father actually gave him a copy of the book Papillon. I don't know if you're going to be aware of what that is, but that is the story of a daring prison escape, which may give you a clue as to, well, the title of the video may well give you a clue as to what we're going on to talk about here. And upon reading this, he very much, it put ideas into his head. He didn't want to stay in prison, he didn't feel he should be in prison, and it planted that seed in his mind of a possible future escape attempt. So Lee and Jenkins were in the end tried for producing and distributing 18 different leaflets on behalf of a banned organisation, aka the ANC. The trial was held in the Cape Town Supreme Court from the 6th to the 15th of June 1978, and unfortunately they both received very, very poor legal representation and advice. They both pleaded guilty to all charges, but were actually only found guilty on one charge, with Jenkins receiving a 12-year prison sentence and Lee receiving an 8-year sentence. So soon after their incarceration, Jenkins and Lee started plotting their escape. They did this with several other ANC prisoners, and they decided together that 8 of them would make this daring attempt to escape together, leaving behind 2 of their comrades who were nearing the end of their sentences. One of the gentlemen they made the plan with was a gentleman called Dennis Goldberg. So he had a way to communicate with the ANC via coded letter to London, and the London office in turn communicated with Mozambique, and they set about arranging an escape vehicle. But as the plan evolved, it became very clear that in order for it to be successful, it would need to be limited to only 3 of the inmates. There was differing opinion among the ANC inmates as to whether they should be going ahead with this, but because they all had a very similar political sort of agenda, they all were singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, they supported their comrades, even though perhaps they thought that the idea was a bit foolhardy. So at this time, Alex Goldberg actually pulled back from the plan. He decided to stay to give the other gentlemen a chance. And our 2 men that we've been speaking about this whole time, Lee and Jenkin, along with another gentleman called Alex Mbari, they planned to be the 3 that would attempt the daring escape from Pretoria prison. Now, the film about this escape is really fantastic, so I don't want to tell you all the details. What I will tell you, and what is commonly known, how they actually achieved the escape, because they did escape from the prison meticulously and unbelievably. Jenkins studied very closely the warden's keys, or the prison officer's keys, for specific doors. Now, between them and freedom, I think there were 12 doors that they would need to unlock. And over a long period of time, and with meticulous effort and woodworking skills, Jenkins set about carving exact replicas of the keys using wood in his cell. Now, he had never held the keys, he had only seen the keys. He would take glimpses at them when they were out doing yard work, he would watch, and over a period of time he did end up with 12 copies of the keys that he needed. There was a lot that went wrong in the meantime. There was some very, very close, almost discoveries. Again, I don't want to tell you about them all because I really would recommend the movie. It's excellent. But in December 1979, the 3 men set about their daring escape. There were some pretty hairy situations along the way. They were almost caught. And although I won't go into any detail as to what happened leading up to it and the whole escape, when the 3 men got to the final door, the door that stood between them and the outside freedom, the final key would not work in the lock. They were stuck. They had got through 11 doors and they were stuck in a little gap between the last 2 doors, 1 door between them to freedom. One of the gentlemen said about attacking the door frame with, I'm not sure if it was a screwdriver or a chisel, in order to forcibly get their way to freedom. Now, this made a lot of noise, and the other 2 gentlemen were not at all happy about this. So, but it did the trick, but they managed to get outside to freedom. But even after getting out of the prison, there were several hurdles to follow. They had to get a car to Mozambique, and they didn't have one arranged as they previously had planned. The whole plan had changed along the way. So they actually got into a taxi with a young black driver who had a sign in the window to say black passengers only, because at that time everything was separate, it was differentiated, and white men were not supposed to get into a cab with a black driver and vice versa. It was seen to be beneath them. So this young black driver was very surprised when these 3 white men wanted a lift and had money to pay him handsomely. And obviously that's who they're going to use. This is just adds more poignancy to the whole story. And the man took them onward, and they made their escape, and nothing was discovered until the next morning. So on the 2nd of January 1980, the men appeared at Lusaka for a press conference to tell their story, along with politician Oliver Tambo, who was an anti-apartheid activist. I will read this next bit out because, again, I will get my words jumbled. Jenkin went on to work as a research officer for the International Defence Aid Fund. That was in London. Obviously his wife was there. And he and Lee went on a speaking tour in Sweden in the early 1980s. While living in Camden, he actually created a rudimentary computer which was capable of writing coded messages which were sent to other activists in prison, including, folks, Nelson Mandela. He returned to South Africa in 1991, where he went on to work for ANC's communication network. From there it was onwards and upwards for Jenkin. He was promoted, he became a director of communications eventually, went on to have a very happy and successful life. And that, folks, is the story of Escape from Pretoria. So the movie is actually based on a book written by Jenkins himself. The book is entitled Inside Out: The Escape from Pretoria Prison. And as I say, fully a true story. The actual movie sticks very, very closely to the story also. And what I found in researching it afterwards really sweet, and the guys still actually have that one. Everything was lost. The keys that they used were lost. They had nothing from the escape, but they still have that final tool used to break through the final door. Unfortunately, I can't remember if it was a screwdriver or a chisel, and it's in one of their toolboxes, and they use it like just generally like another tool. That famous tool that enabled those three men to escape Pretoria Prison. And to me, just bravo. It was really enthralling movie. I watched it purely just as another movie to watch. I didn't know the story, and I didn't know it was true. And it's just, I mean, if you like Shawshank Redemption and you like The Man from Alcatraz, sorry, Escape from Alcatraz, this is just fantastic. There's a lot of Escape from Alcatraz vibes about this movie. But I just wanted to tell you folks the story of the Escape from Pretoria Prison, because I myself found it riveting. And I hope you find it interesting too, and I would encourage you to seek out the movie and give it a watch. Fantastic performances. Obviously your storyline is amazing because it's true. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts, guys. Let me know below in the comments, and I will talk to you next time. Over and out from Lisa Loves.